Marcus Chen had seen enough combat zones to know when something was wrong. The distress beacon crackling through his ship's communication system carried frequencies he'd never heard before. Harmonics that seemed to vibrate through his bones rather than just his ears. 3 days out from the Kepler station, hauling medical supplies to the Outer Rim colonies, he should have ignored it. Company protocol was clear about unauthorized detours, but Marcus had never been good at following protocols when lives were at stake. The beacon led him to a debris field, orbiting a dying red giant. Twisted metal fragments drifted in the cosmic wind, some pieces larger than his cargo hauler. The wreckage bore markings he didn't recognize, curved symbols that seemed to shift and flow even as he watched them through his scope. Whatever had happened here, it had been violent and recent. The metal still glowed with residual heat. "Computer, scan for life signs," Marcus muttered, adjusting his ship's sensors to maximum sensitivity. The response came immediately. Single biological signature detected. Extremely weak. Distance: 400 meters. Bearing 27 Mark IV. Marcus guided his ship toward the source, maneuvering carefully through the debris field. His external cameras finally focused on what remained of an escape pod, if that's what it was. The thing looked more like a crystalline egg than any human-made craft. Cracks spider-webbed across its surface, and a sickly green fluid leaked from several ruptures. Inside, barely visible through the translucent shell, something moved. Marcus had extracted survivors from worse situations. He activated his ship's tractor beam and carefully drew the damaged pod into his cargo hold. The moment it settled onto the deck plating, the crystalline surface began to dissolve like sugar in rain. What emerged made Marcus take 3 steps backward, his hand instinctively moving toward the plasma pistol at his hip. The creature was roughly the size of a large dog, but there the similarity ended. Scales, the color of deep emeralds, covered its serpentine body. 6 legs ending in delicate claws supported its weight, while gossamer wings hung torn and bloodied from its shoulders. Its head was distinctly draconic, elongated snout filled with needle-sharp teeth, and eyes like liquid gold that fixed on Marcus with unmistakable intelligence. A dragon, an actual, living dragon. The creature tried to stand but collapsed immediately. Dark blood seeped from dozens of wounds across its body. Its breathing came in shallow, desperate gasps. One wing hung at an impossible angle, clearly broken. But what struck Marcus most was the sound it made. A soft, mournful keening that reminded him painfully of a crying child. "Easy there, little one," Marcus said softly, holstering his weapon. He approached slowly, hands visible and empty. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dragon's golden eyes tracked his movement. When Marcus knelt within arm's reach, the creature made no move to attack. Instead, it lifted its head with obvious effort and pressed its snout against Marcus's outstretched palm. The touch sent warmth racing up his arm, and for a moment, Marcus could swear he felt emotions that weren't his own. Gratitude, desperation, and beneath it all, a vast, ancient sadness. "Computer, medical bay analysis," Marcus called out. "What do you make of our passenger?" "Unknown species. Biological makeup suggests high intelligence and extremely complex neural pathways. Multiple severe injuries detected. Projected survival time without intervention: approximately 6 hours. 6 hours. Marcus looked into those golden eyes and made his decision. The next several hours blurred together in a haze of improvised medical procedures. Marcus had field medic training from his military days, but nothing had prepared him for treating an injured dragon. The creature's anatomy was unlike anything in his medical databases. Its blood glowed faintly blue under UV light, and its internal organs seemed to shift and flow in patterns that defied conventional biology. Working mostly on instinct and desperation, Marcus cleaned and sutured wounds, set the broken wing with improvised splints, and administered broad-spectrum antibiotics from his medical kit. The dragon endured it all with stoic patience, occasionally pressing its snout against Marcus's hand when the pain became too much. As Marcus worked, he began to notice other things. The dragon's wounds weren't random. They formed patterns that looked suspiciously like weapon strikes. Burn marks scorched its scales in precise lines, Whatever had attacked this creature hadn't been trying to drive it away or defend territory. This had been an execution attempt. "Who did this to you?" Marcus whispered, as he applied the last bandage. The dragon looked at him for a long moment, then did something impossible. Images flashed through Marcus's mind, not his own memories, but scenes viewed through alien eyes. He saw massive ships with aggressive angular designs descending from space. Beings in environmental suits methodically destroying settlements, while smaller creatures, more dragons, fled in terror. He watched as warriors in advanced armor hunted down the fleeing survivors with ruthless efficiency. The vision ended abruptly, leaving Marcus gasping. The dragon had somehow shared its memories with him through touch alone. And what he'd seen made his blood run cold. "Genocide," he breathed. "They're wiping out your entire species." The dragon's response was to curl up against Marcus's leg, seeking comfort and warmth. Despite its alien nature, the gesture was heartbreakingly familiar. Marcus had seen the same behavior in war orphans he'd helped evacuate from combat zones. The instinctive need to trust someone, anyone, when everything else had been stripped away. Marcus made his second decision of the day, though this one would prove far more costly than the first. His ship's long-range scanners detected the pursuit ships 18 hours later. 3 vessels, their signatures matching nothing in the human databases. They moved with predatory precision through the debris field, clearly following the same distress beacon that had led Marcus here. Their scanning beams swept across his ship like searchlights, and he knew they'd found him. "Computer, identify those ships," Marcus ordered, though he already suspected the answer. Unknown configuration. Technology appears significantly advanced beyond current human standards. They are hailing us. On screen, the being that appeared on Marcus's communication display was humanoid, but clearly not human. Its skin had a grayish-blue tint, and its eyes were solid black orbs that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When it spoke, its voice carried the same bone-deep resonance as the original distress beacon. "Human vessel, you carry stolen property of the hegemony. Surrender the creature immediately, and you will be permitted to leave unharmed." Marcus looked down at the dragon, which had managed to lift its head and was watching the screen with obvious terror. Its small body trembled against his leg. "I don't see any property here," Marcus replied calmly. "Just an injured survivor who needed medical attention." The alien's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "The draconic species has been classified as a threat to galactic stability. By harboring this creature, you make yourself complicit in potential future atrocities. This is your final warning." Marcus reached down and gently stroked the dragon's head. The creature leaned into his touch. And again, he felt that strange emotional connection. Trust, hope, and something that might have been love. Whatever these beings were afraid of, it wasn't this small, wounded creature. "My final answer is no," Marcus said. "If you want the dragon, you'll have to go through me." The alien's image flickered and disappeared. Immediately, Marcus's ship shuddered under weapons fire. Marcus had piloted everything from atmospheric fighters to deep space cruisers during his military career. His cargo hauler wasn't built for combat, but it was tough and surprisingly maneuverable in experienced hands. He threw the ship into evasive maneuvers while his computer calculated jump coordinates for the nearest human settlement. The alien ships were faster and better armed, but they seemed reluctant to use their full firepower. Marcus realized they were trying to disable rather than destroy. They wanted the dragon alive. That gave him an advantage, however small. "Computer, how long until we can jump?" he called out, as another volley of energy blasts rocked the ship. "Jump drive requires 47 seconds to charge. Hull integrity at 68% and falling. 47 seconds might as well have been 47 years. Marcus pushed the ship harder, diving through the debris field and using the larger fragments as cover. Behind him, the alien ships followed with relentless precision. Their weapons fire grew more intense, and Marcus knew they were losing patience with his resistance. The dragon had somehow managed to climb onto the pilot's chair beside him. Despite its injuries, it watched the tactical display with obvious intelligence. When one of the pursuing ships lined up for what would clearly be a killing shot, the dragon made a soft, chittering sound and touched one of Marcus's hands with its snout. Another vision flashed through Marcus's mind, this one showing his own ship from an external perspective. He could see things his sensors couldn't detect. Weak points in the pursuing ship's formations, blind spots in their scanning arrays, even optimal flight paths through the debris field. The dragon was somehow sharing tactical information with him, giving him insights no human pilot could possibly have. Using this impossible knowledge, Marcus executed a maneuver that should have been suicidal. He dove his ship directly toward the largest piece of wreckage, the broken hull of what had once been a massive vessel. At the last possible second, he rolled the ship and slipped through a gap barely wider than his hull. The pursuing ships, caught off guard by his sudden course change, couldn't react in time to follow. Two of them slammed into the wreckage at high speed, their advanced hulls crumpling like paper. The third ship pulled up just in time to avoid the same fate, but the delay gave Marcus the precious seconds he needed. Jump drive charged, the computer announced. Execute jump now. Reality twisted around them as the ship entered hyperspace. For a moment, Marcus felt like he was falling in every direction at once. Then the sensation passed, and they were racing through the star-flecked tunnel of FTL travel. Marcus slumped back in his pilot's chair, adrenaline slowly fading from his system. They'd escaped, but he knew this was far from over. The aliens, the hegemony, they'd called themselves, clearly had resources and technology that dwarfed anything humanity possessed. And they were committed to hunting down every member of the draconic species. The dragon looked up at him with those impossible golden eyes. Despite everything they'd been through, Marcus saw no fear there now. Only trust, and something that looked suspiciously like determination. We can't run forever, Marcus said softly. They'll find us eventually. Oh, the dragon pressed against his hand again. And this time the vision it shared was different. Marcus saw a vast network of worlds connected by streams of light. He felt the dragon's memories of a time when its species had been welcomed as allies and protectors, and beneath it all, he sensed something else, potential, power that slept within the small creature beside him, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Marcus made his third decision, and this one would change the course of galactic history. All right, little one, he said. If they want a war, we'll give them one. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe, so you can grow strong enough to fight back. The dragon's response was to curl up more tightly against him. And for the first time since their escape began, it fell into what looked like peaceful sleep. Marcus set course for the furthest human outpost he knew, a mining station so remote that even the hegemony might not think to look there. As his ship raced through hyperspace toward an uncertain future, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just witnessed something momentous. The dragon sleeping beside him might look small and helpless now, but there had been something in those shared visions, a sense of vast power held in check, of potential that could reshape the galaxy itself. The hegemony had made a critical error. They'd shown mercy to a human who wouldn't return the favor, and in trying to commit genocide against a species they feared, they'd just created their own worst nightmare. Marcus Chen had always been a protector. Now, whether he realized it or not, he'd just become something much more dangerous. He'd become a guardian, and guardians, as the galaxy would soon learn, were not to be trifled with. The mining station Erebus was exactly as miserable as Marcus remembered. Carved into the side of a massive asteroid, it existed in the permanent shadow between three dead stars. The miners who worked here were either running from something or had nowhere else to go. It was the perfect place to disappear. Marcus had been hiding on Erebus for 3 months when everything changed. The dragon, who Marcus had started calling Echo because of the way its thoughts resonated in his mind, had grown at an impossible rate. What had once been the size of a large dog now stood nearly as tall as Marcus's waist. Its scales had deepened from emerald to a rich forest green that seemed to shift and flow in the light. The gossamer wings had healed stronger than before, and when Echo stretched them fully, they spanned nearly 12 feet. But the most dramatic change wasn't physical. The mental connection between them had grown stronger, more complex. Marcus could feel Echo's emotions as clearly as his own, and sometimes he caught glimpses of memories that belonged to neither of them. Ancient scenes of dragons soaring between stars, their thoughts linking across vast distances to form a collective consciousness that had once spanned the galaxy. The hegemony had tried to destroy that network. They'd almost succeeded. Marcus was reviewing supply manifests in his cramped quarters when the alarm started screaming. The station's communication system crackled to life with the voice of Commander Torres, the grizzled ex-military officer who ran Erebus. All personnel to emergency stations. We have unknown vessels approaching. This is not a drill. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Echo's head snapped up from where the dragon had been napping near the small heating unit. Through their mental link, Marcus felt a spike of recognition and terror. They found us, Marcus whispered. Echo's response came as images flooding his mind. 3 ships identical to those they'd encountered months ago. But these were larger, more heavily armed. And they weren't alone. Marcus saw dozens of smaller craft surrounding the massive vessels like metallic sharks. The hegemony had brought a fleet. Marcus grabbed his emergency kit and the modified plasma rifle he'd purchased from a weapons dealer on Titan Station. Echo moved to his side, the dragon's golden eyes now blazing with an inner fire that Marcus had never seen before. Computer, display tactical overview, Marcus called out. The holographic display that materialized showed Erebus surrounded by 43 enemy vessels. The station's defensive systems were minimal. A few mining laser turrets, and an obsolete shield generator. Against hegemony technology, they might as well have been throwing rocks. Station personnel, this is War Master Zektar of the Hegemony 4th Fleet. A familiar voice echoed through the communication system. You harbor a Class Omega threat entity. Surrender it immediately, or face total annihilation. Commander Torres's response was immediate and colorful. Hegemony Fleet. This is Erebus Station. We don't negotiate with alien scum. If you want something from us, come and take it. Marcus had to admire Torres's courage, even as he recognized the futility of their situation. The station had maybe 600 people aboard, most of them civilians. The Hegemony Fleet could reduce Erebus to vapor in minutes. Echo touched Marcus's hand, and suddenly his mind filled with tactical data. He could see the enemy fleet's formations, their weapon placements, even the energy patterns of their shields. But more than that, he sensed something else. Other minds touching his own across the vast distances of space. Impossible, Marcus breathed. Echo looked up at him with those blazing golden eyes and shared a truth that changed everything. The hegemony hadn't succeeded in their genocide. Hidden throughout the galaxy, other dragons had survived. They'd been waiting, growing strong, preparing for this moment, and now they were coming. The first sign was a ripple in space itself, visible on the long-range sensors as a distortion in the fabric of reality. Then another, and another. Within moments, the space around Erebus filled with tears in the cosmic background, each one disgorging vessels unlike anything in Marcus's experience. The dragon ships were living works of art. Their hulls seemed to be grown rather than built, flowing in organic curves that suggested both grace and terrible power. They moved through space like marine predators, their weapon ports opening and closing like breathing gills. Marcus counted at least 30 vessels, each one easily the size of a hegemony cruiser. But it was what happened next that truly demonstrated the difference between the two species. Echo spread its wings and released a sound that had no equivalent in human language. Part roar, part song, part something that spoke directly to the soul. Every dragon ship in the growing fleet responded in kind, their voices creating a harmony that resonated through both space and the mental network Marcus was now connected to. Through that network, Marcus experienced something no human had ever felt before. He was part of a collective consciousness that spanned dozens of brilliant minds, each one ancient beyond human comprehension, each one burning with righteous fury at what had been done to their species. And in that moment, Marcus understood what the hegemony truly feared. The dragons weren't just intelligent. They were capable of coordinating perfectly across vast distances, sharing knowledge and tactical information instantaneously. A dragon fleet didn't fight as individual ships. It fought as a single organism, with dozens of bodies, and one unified will. The hegemony had tried to commit genocide not out of malice, but out of terror. They'd recognized that the dragons represented an evolutionary step beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. War Master Zektar. Commander Taurus's voice came over the communication system again, but now it carried a note of savage satisfaction. I believe you have a problem. The hegemony fleet had indeed recognized their situation. Their ships began to form defensive formations, but their movements seemed sluggish and uncoordinated compared to the flowing dance of the dragon vessels. When the first exchange of weapons fire came, the difference became even more apparent. Hegemony plasma bolts lanced out in concentrated bursts, powerful enough to punch through the armor of any human ship, but the dragon vessels moved like they could see the future, sliding between the energy beams with impossible grace. Their return fire was something entirely different. Beams of coherent energy that seemed to bend and twist through space, following their targets, no matter how the hegemony ships tried to evade. Marcus watched through the station's sensors as the first hegemony vessel simply ceased to exist. One moment, it was there, launching missiles at a dragon ship. The next moment, there was only empty space and a rapidly expanding cloud of elementary particles. But the real shock came when Marcus realized that he could follow the battle through Echo's connection to the Dragon network. He was experiencing the fight from the perspective of every dragon ship simultaneously, feeling their coordinated movements like a vast, deadly ballet. Through the network, he sensed the dragon's strategy. They weren't trying to destroy the hegemony fleet, they were herding it. Like wolves surrounding a flock of sheep, the dragon ships moved to cut off every escape route, while steadily reducing the enemy's numbers. Marcus Chen. A voice spoke directly into his mind. Not Echo's familiar mental touch, but something older and infinitely more powerful. We have much to discuss. The voice belonged to Keeper Velthes, an ancient dragon whose ship served as the fleet's flagship. Through the network, Marcus felt the weight of millennia pressing against his consciousness. Velthes had been alive when the dragons first took to the stars, had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations, had seen his people scattered and hunted nearly to extinction. You protected one of our young, Velthes continued. You risked your life for a being you had never seen before, simply because it was right to do so. Such actions have consequences. Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation spreading through his body. Looking down at his hands, he saw that his skin was beginning to glow with the same soft light that emanated from Echo's scales. What's happening to me? Marcus asked. Echo pressed against his leg, and through their connection, Marcus felt something that might have been laughter. The dragon shared an image. Marcus as he would become. Changed, but still fundamentally himself. Stronger, faster, with senses that could perceive things no unmodified human ever could. He would live longer, think faster, and most importantly, he would remain connected to the Dragon network for the rest of his existence. The bond between protector and protected cannot be severed, Velthes explained. You chose to become Echo's guardian. Now, Echo chooses to share its gifts with you. Outside the station, the battle was reaching its conclusion. The hegemony fleet had been reduced to fewer than a dozen ships, all of them trapped within an ever-tightening web of dragon vessels. Marcus could feel the collective will of the Dragon network focusing on the remaining enemies like a lens concentrating sunlight. But instead of destroying them, the dragons did something unexpected. War Master Zektar, Velthes's voice boomed across all communication frequencies. Your fleet is defeated. Your ships are trapped. But we offer you something your kind never offered us. A choice. On the main display, Marcus could see the lead hegemony vessel, its hull scarred and scorched from weapons fire. When Zektar appeared on the screen, his solid black eyes reflected nothing but defiant rage. We do not surrender to vermin, the War Master snarled. Then you misunderstand, Velthes replied calmly. We are not offering surrender. We are offering evolution. What happened next would be recorded in galactic history as the moment everything changed. The dragon ships opened their weapon ports, but instead of death rays, they projected something else entirely. Streams of pure information encoded in quantum particles. Marcus felt it through the network, the accumulated knowledge of an entire species being transmitted directly into the minds of their enemies. Every hegemony warrior suddenly experienced what it felt like to think as a dragon thought, to see the galaxy through eyes that perceived beauty and potential rather than threats to be eliminated. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Through the communication system, Marcus could hear hegemony soldiers crying out in shock and wonder as their minds expanded beyond the limitations of their original programming. They were experiencing empathy for the first time, understanding the full horror of what their species had tried to accomplish. Most of them couldn't handle it. Marcus watched through the network as ship after ship powered down its weapons and engines. Some hegemony warriors were catatonic from the shock of sudden enlightenment. Others were weeping as they truly comprehended the magnitude of their crimes. But War Master Zektar was different. Marcus could see the alien commander fighting against the mental intrusion, his conditioning too strong to break completely. When the information stream ended, Zektar's black eyes blazed with unchanged hatred. "Clever," the War Master admitted. "You have broken my fleet without destroying it. But this changes nothing. The hegemony has 1,000 fleets. 10,000. We will hunt your species to extinction, and we will not stop until every dragon in the galaxy is dead." Velthus's response carried a note of profound sadness. "Then you have chosen poorly." The ancient dragon's next words would echo across the galaxy, transmitted on every frequency, translated into every known language. "To all beings who can hear this message, know that the time of hiding is over. The dragons have returned, and we are no longer alone. We have found allies among the humans, a species that chooses courage over fear, protection over destruction. Together, we will build something new in this galaxy." Marcus felt the truth of those words, resonating through the network. This wasn't just about defending Echo anymore. This was about fundamental change on a galactic scale. The remaining hegemony ships were allowed to leave, their crews forever changed by their encounter with dragon consciousness. They would return to their homeworlds carrying seeds of doubt, questions that would spread like wildfire through a civilization built on unthinking obedience. But Zektar's ship was different. As the War Master prepared to depart, Velthus made one final offer. "Your hatred runs deep, Zektar. But hatred is just another form of fear. When you are ready to let go of both, we will be waiting." The War Master's only response was to activate his ship's weapons one last time, targeting not the Dragon Fleet but Erebus Station itself. The plasma bolt that erupted from his ship's main cannon carried enough energy to vaporize the entire mining facility. It never reached its target. Echo launched itself from the station's docking bay, wings spread wide, golden eyes blazing with power that Marcus could feel through their bond. The young dragon had grown far beyond its physical size. Its consciousness now touched every member of the network. Drawing on their combined strength, the plasma bolt struck Echo's outstretched claws and simply stopped. For a moment that seemed to last forever, the dragon hung in space, holding back enough destructive energy to annihilate a small moon. Then, with a sound that registered as both roar and song, Echo redirected that energy back at its source. Zektar's ship disappeared in a flash of light that briefly outshone the local star. Marcus watched from the station's observation deck as Echo slowly flew back toward Erebus, the young dragon's form now blazing with energies that existed beyond the normal spectrum of light. When Echo landed in the docking bay, the dragon looked exactly as it had before. But Marcus could feel the fundamental change that had occurred. Echo was no longer just a survivor of genocide. It had become something new, something that combined the ancient wisdom of its species with the protective instincts it had learned from Marcus, a guardian in the truest sense of the word. As the dragon fleet prepared to depart for destinations unknown, Velthus sent one final message through the network. "The galaxy is about to change, Marcus Chen. The question is whether you are ready to change with it." Marcus looked down at his hands, still glowing with the soft light that marked his transformation. Through his bond with Echo, he could feel the vast network of dragon consciousness stretching across the galaxy, and somewhere in that network, he sensed other humans. protectors who had made the same choice he had, guardians who had chosen to stand with the dragons against the forces of extinction. The war was just beginning. But for the first time, since this all started, Marcus believed they might actually win. 2 years had passed since the battle at Erebus Station, and the galaxy had indeed changed beyond recognition. Marcus stood on the bridge of the sanctuary, a vessel unlike anything that had existed before the alliance between humans and dragons. The ship itself was a perfect fusion of technologies, human engineering providing the practical framework, while dragon biotechnology gave it capabilities that defied conventional physics. The hull could regenerate damage, the engines drew power from quantum fluctuations in space itself, and the navigation system used the collective consciousness of the Dragon network to plot courses through dimensions that normal sensors couldn't detect. But the ship was just a symbol of something much larger. Through the observation ports, Marcus could see the sprawling construction projects that filled the space around New Dracoris, SAM, the first jointly built city designed to house both species comfortably. Human architects had learned to work with dragon builders whose understanding of space and structure operated on principles that seemed more like art than engineering. Echo had grown again during their travels. The dragon now stood nearly 8 feet tall, its wingspan approaching 30 feet when fully extended. The scales had deepened to a color that seemed to shift between green and gold depending on the light, and the eyes that had once held only pain and fear now blazed with ancient wisdom and unshakable determination. Most importantly, Echo was no longer alone. The Dragon network had rebuilt itself stronger than before, connecting survivors scattered across hundreds of worlds, and for the first time in the species' history, it included non-dragons. Marcus and nearly 3,000 other humans had undergone the bonding process, becoming permanent bridges between two very different forms of consciousness. The hegemony had not taken these changes well. Guardian Chen, a voice spoke through the ship's communication system. It belonged to Captain Sarah Rodriguez, one of the other human dragon partners, who commanded a patrol vessel on the outer perimeter. We're detecting massive gravitational distortions on Vector 7-7 Mark 12. Looks like they're finally making their move. Marcus felt Echo's attention sharpen beside him. Through the Dragon network, tactical information flowed instantly between every allied ship in the system. The hegemony had been building up forces for months, massing fleets in hidden staging areas throughout their territory. Intelligence suggested they were preparing for what they called the final cleansing, a coordinated assault designed to wipe out both dragons and their human allies in a single devastating blow. Today, it seemed, that assault was beginning. Computer, long-range analysis, Marcus ordered. The tactical display that materialized showed a sight that would have terrified any military commander in the galaxy. Over 400 hegemony vessels were dropping out of hyperspace in perfectly coordinated formations. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons, carrier ships bristling with thousands of fighter craft, and massive siege vessels equipped with planet-killing weapons. But most disturbing of all were the ships at the center of the formation. Marcus had never seen their like before. Black vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, their hulls covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Through the Dragon network, he felt a collective shiver of recognition and fear. Void breakers. Echo's voice resonated directly in his mind, carrying overtones of ancient horror. Ships designed specifically to disrupt our network. The hegemony has been busy. The lead hegemony vessel opened communication channels on all frequencies. The being that appeared on screen was not Zektar. The War Master had died at Erebus Station. This was someone new, someone whose black eyes carried a cold intelligence that seemed to pierce through the display directly into Marcus's soul. "I am Supreme Commander Vorthak," the alien announced. "By order of the Hegemony High Council, this system is now under total quarantine. All dragons and their contaminated human allies have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or face complete annihilation." The response came not from Marcus or any single individual, but from the Dragon network itself. Thousands of voices speaking in perfect harmony, their words carrying power that made the very fabric of space vibrate. "We are the guardians of this galaxy's future. We do not yield to those who choose extinction over evolution. If you wish to test our resolve, You will find it immutable. Vorthok's expression didn't change, but Marcus detected a flicker of something that might have been uncertainty in those black eyes. Very well. Begin the cleansing. What followed was unlike any battle the galaxy had ever witnessed. The hegemony attack began with a coordinated bombardment designed to overwhelm the Allied defenses through sheer volume of fire. Thousands of energy beams lanced out from their ships, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a small asteroid. Any conventional fleet would have been reduced to vapor in the first 30 seconds. But the Dragon-Human Alliance didn't fight conventional battles. Through the network, Marcus felt the collective consciousness of every dragon in the system merge into a single entity. Their combined will reached out across space and simply redirected the incoming fire. Plasma bolts curved away from their targets. Missile warheads detonated harmlessly in empty space, and particle beams scattered like light hitting a prism. The Allied response was swift and devastating. Dragon ships flowed through space like living things, their movements coordinated with inhuman precision. Human vessels followed in perfect formation, their crews linked to the Dragon network through their bonded partners. They fought not as separate ships, but as components of a vast organism guided by unified purpose. Marcus watched through Echo's enhanced senses as the first wave of hegemony fighters closed with their forces. The enemy craft moved in rigid formations, their pilots following predetermined attack patterns with mechanical precision. Against the fluid dance of dragon tactics, they might as well have been stationary targets. Dragon fighters, living creatures bred for space combat rather than built machines, swarmed through the hegemony formations like schools of metallic fish. They didn't just avoid enemy fire, they anticipated it, moving to positions that wouldn't be optimal until seconds later, when the enemy weapons actually fired. But it was the human element that truly made the alliance formidable. Where dragons thought in terms of harmony and collective action, humans brought unpredictability and innovation. Marcus felt it through the network. Thousands of human minds providing creative solutions, tactical surprises, and strategic insights that purely dragon thinking might never have conceived. The result was warfare elevated to an art form. Allied forces struck at weak points in hegemony formations that shouldn't have existed, executed maneuvers that seemed to violate basic physics, and coordinated attacks across such vast distances that the enemy couldn't adapt to their changing tactics. Within an hour, the hegemony had lost nearly a third of their fleet, but Vorthok wasn't finished. The Supreme Commander had anticipated that conventional tactics might prove insufficient against dragon abilities. That's why he'd brought the Voidbreakers. Marcus felt it the moment the black ships activated their primary weapons. A wave of wrongness washed through the dragon network, disrupting the mental connections that allowed such perfect coordination. For the first time since the battle began, Allied ships started operating independently, their movements becoming noticeably less fluid. Quantum disruptors, Echo explained, strain evident in the dragon's mental voice. They're using controlled black holes to interfere with our consciousness links. Through the network, Marcus could sense the pain this was causing the dragons. Their species had evolved to think collectively. Forcing them to operate as individuals was like trying to function with half their brain removed. Several dragon ships began to drift aimlessly, their pilots overwhelmed by the sudden isolation. But the hegemony had made a critical error in their calculations. They'd assumed that disrupting the dragon network would also sever the bonds between dragons and their human partners. What they discovered instead was that the human brain operated on different principles entirely. Marcus felt his connection to Echo intensify rather than weaken. Without the vast dragon network to buffer their mental link, the bond between individual partnerships became stronger and more direct. And humans, it turned out, were much better at fighting as independent operators than dragons were. All human commanders, Marcus broadcast on the emergency frequency, switch to individual combat protocols. We're on our own now. The tactical situation shifted dramatically. Dragon ships that had been struggling to function alone suddenly found their human partners, providing the independent thinking they needed to operate effectively. Human crews used their training and instincts to guide their dragon allies through the disorienting isolation. Most importantly, the humans began to fight with a fury that surprised everyone, including themselves. Marcus piloted the sanctuary through a maze of weapons fire, Echo's supernatural reflexes combined with his own tactical experience. They weren't just defending their new home anymore. They were protecting beings who had become family. The Dragon Network had shown every human partner what it felt like to think as part of something larger than themselves. Having that connection severed was like losing a limb. The human response was immediate and devastating. Captain Rodriguez's ship dove directly at one of the void breakers, her dragon partner generating a field of distorted space-time around them that made them effectively untouchable. She rammed the enemy vessel at nearly light speed, her ship's enhanced hull punching through the hegemony vessel's armor like it was made of paper. Across the battlefield, other human dragon teams executed similarly impossible maneuvers. They flew through solid matter, by phasing between dimensions, survived direct hits from planet-killing weapons, by distributing the energy across multiple parallel realities, and struck back with weapons that shouldn't have existed outside of theoretical physics. The tide of battle turned when Marcus made a connection that no one else had considered. The Void Breakers were using controlled black holes to disrupt the Dragon Network, but black holes were just collapsed matter, and matter could be manipulated by sufficiently advanced technology. Echo, Marcus said aloud, can you access the quantum structure of those black holes? The dragon's response came as a wave of fierce joy. Not alone, but with you to provide the creative spark. Marcus felt his consciousness merge completely with Echo's for the first time since their original bonding. But this was different from the gentle connection they usually shared. This was a fusion of two very different types of awareness. Dragon intuition and human innovation, combining into something entirely new. Through their merged consciousness, Marcus reached out toward the nearest void breaker. Instead of trying to fight the black hole it projected, he began to understand it. The quantum mechanics that held it stable, the gravitational fields that gave it structure, the exotic matter that prevented it from evaporating, and then he changed it. The void breaker exploded as its primary weapon reversed polarity and began to attract matter from the ship itself, rather than projecting disruption fields outward. The black hole that had been designed to break dragon consciousness instead consumed the vessel that had created it. Other human-dragon partnerships felt the technique through their bonds and immediately began to replicate it. Within minutes, every void breaker in the hegemony fleet had been turned into a weapon against its own side. With the quantum disruptors eliminated, the Dragon Network snapped back to full strength. But now it was different, enhanced by the human partners who had learned to maintain their connections even under impossible conditions. The collective consciousness that reformed was more flexible, more creative, and infinitely more dangerous than anything the galaxy had seen before. Supreme Commander Vorthak found himself commanding a fleet that was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that fought like a force of nature given intelligence and purpose. His carefully planned assault had become a rout. His overwhelming numerical advantage turned meaningless by coordination that transcended normal tactical concepts. All ships, the Supreme Commander ordered, his voice tight with desperation. Implement the Scorched Galaxy Protocol. Ender 40. Ender first. Ender 40. 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 Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in his ship. Through the Dragon Network, ancient memories surfaced. Records of the last time the hegemony had used that particular weapon. The Scorched Galaxy Protocol involved deliberately destabilizing local stars, turning entire solar systems into expanding clouds of plasma and radiation. They're going to destroy everything. Echo's mental voice carried overtones of horrified disbelief. Their own ships, our forces, the civilian populations on nearby worlds. Everything. The hegemony fleet began to spread out, each remaining vessel moving toward a different star in the local cluster. Marcus could see the massive stellar manipulation devices deploying from their hulls, technology capable of triggering supernovas in stable stars. If they succeeded, the explosion would propagate through subspace, potentially destabilizing stars across dozens of light years. It was genocide on a scale that defied imagination. The hegemony would rather destroy a significant portion of the galaxy than allow the Dragon-Human alliance to continue existing. But they'd underestimated what Marcus and his allies had become. Through the network, every dragon and human in the system felt the same realization simultaneously. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future of every sentient being in the galaxy. And that level of motivation unlocked capabilities that none of them had known they possessed. Marcus felt his consciousness expand beyond anything he'd ever experienced. Not just merged with Echo, but connected to every member of the Alliance. Thousands of minds thinking as one. Their combined will focused on a single purpose. They reached out across space and took control of the hegemony's stellar manipulation devices. The technology designed to destroy stars instead began to enhance them. Fusion rates increased, solar output intensified, and massive coronal ejections launched streams of charged particles toward precisely calculated coordinates. Within minutes, every hegemony ship found itself caught in the path of directed stellar phenomena that made their own weapons seem like toys. Ships that could withstand planet-killing weapons were reduced to vapor by streams of matter moving at significant fractions of light speed. Armor that could deflect directed energy beams melted like ice under the focused output of an entire star. The hegemony fleet simply ceased to exist, consumed by the very forces they'd tried to weaponize. Supreme Commander Vorthak's ship was the last to fall. As the stellar wind closed in around his vessel, he opened communication channels one final time. "This isn't over," he transmitted, his black eyes reflecting the blazing light that was about to consume him. "The hegemony has resources you cannot imagine. We will return with forces that..." The transmission cut off as Vorthak's ship vanished in a flash of stellar fire. In the silence that followed, Marcus gradually felt his consciousness separate from the vast collective that had formed during the battle. But the separation wasn't complete. Threads of connection remained, linking him permanently to every member of the Alliance. They were no longer just individuals who fought together. They were part of something larger than the sum of their parts. Echo settled beside him, the dragon's golden eyes reflecting satisfaction and deep contentment. Through their bond, Marcus felt echoes of the same emotion from thousands of other partnerships throughout the system. "It's finished," Echo said simply, but Marcus knew better. The immediate threat was over, but the hegemony would return eventually with new weapons and new strategies. The Alliance would face other challenges, other enemies who feared the evolution that dragons and humans represented together. However, something fundamental had changed during the battle. The galaxy had seen what was possible when two very different species chose cooperation over conflict. When they merged their strengths instead of trying to eliminate their differences. Other races were already sending diplomatic missions to New Dracarys, seeking to understand this new form of consciousness that had just rewritten the rules of warfare. Marcus looked out at the stars that surrounded their system, no longer seeing them as distant lights, but as potential homes for the Alliance that was still growing. The Dragon Network now spanned dozens of worlds, and it was expanding every day as new species chose to join rather than fight the future. The hegemony had tried to commit genocide and ended up creating exactly what they'd feared most: a unified consciousness that combined the best traits of multiple species. They'd succeeded only in ensuring their own eventual obsolescence. Echo stretched its wings and released that harmonious sound that had once marked their first meeting. This time, it was answered by hundreds of voices across the system. Dragons and their human partners celebrating not just victory, but the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. Marcus Chen had started this journey as a simple cargo hauler, trying to save one injured creature. Now he was part of a collective consciousness that spanned star systems and included multiple species. He was no longer just a guardian protecting a single dragon. He'd become something the galaxy had never seen before. A bridge between worlds, a catalyst for evolution, and a guardian of the future itself. As the sanctuary began its journey toward the next system where refugees needed protection, Marcus felt the vast network of minds that now surrounded him like a warm embrace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The age of isolated species fighting for survival was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and it would reshape the galaxy in ways that even the dragon's ancient wisdom could not fully predict. But for the first time in his life, Marcus was certain of one thing: the future would be worth protecting.